Okay, welcome to House of Bread Ministries tonight. Tonight we're going to be studying about traumas. And so we're going to go over a few things about how maybe trauma has come into your life or a child's life. And so the first thing that we're going to be studying is conception to birth. And Deuteronomy 23:2 talks about a bastard's curse. And if you've never listened to that, then you need to tune in when we teach on that. But that's someone that's been born out of wedlock, and there are some curses that come along with being born out of wedlock that you'll need to know and repent and renounce those things so you can break that curse off of yourself or someone that you know. Another thing is a child may be unwanted. If that's a trauma, because a child knows and they feel the emotions and every word that's said. When they're in your womb, they can hear the things and they know whether they're being welcomed into the world or whether they're unwanted. And we see genetic problems that will come along. Conception as a result of crime, that's a trauma. Conception as a result of drunkenness, where somebody goes out and gets drunk and they have sex with somebody and then they don't really know that person, and so we see that they're born out of drunkenness. And there may be rejection. The child may feel rejection. Maybe the child's being born at a time when they consider it inconvenient. They weren't planned, and the child feels rejection from this. A mother's physical or emotional illness. The mother may be physically sick and not planning on a pregnancy right then, or maybe emotionally she's raised her children and she has got them all in school and then she doesn't want to start over. I know there was 8 years difference between me and my brother that's above me, and my mother had already had her 7 children and she didn't want another child because she had already got them up and in school, and now she was going to have to start all over and with diapers and feeding. And but then, another child comes along, and a child knows and feels these things. They know if they're being welcomed into the world. And maybe you feel rejection because maybe your father wanted a boy, or maybe your mother wanted a girl. And so we see this happening a lot of times where someone will be named like a man's name, that because they wanted to name the son after the son named Paul, but then she ended up having to be a Paulette because she was a girl. And so this happens, and the child feels this, and it's trauma to them. And there's also trauma if you're born with a breech, or if you're born breech. I know when I was having my own daughter, she kept wanting to be upside down. She wanted to come feet first instead of head first, and they had to keep turning her. And she had some trauma to her neck during the delivery because they had to bring her out with forceps. And so there are some traumas that you need to have broken off of you even when you're being birthed. And you could have a cord around your neck. I know someone personally that had a cord wrapped around their neck because when they were being born, and it was suffocating them. And so, and we talk about horror stories that said to the pregnant mother, horrible stories. Don't be telling a pregnant woman horror stories or horrible things that have happened. Don't be watching murder things on TV. Don't be going to see all these scary movies because, you're feeding that into your baby, all your emotions, all these different things. And so you've got to be so careful while you're pregnant not to be how you feel about yourself and what others say and how they're welcoming your baby into the world. And we're going to go over another teaching in a couple of weeks about from conception to birth and blessing the child throughout from their conception to birth, and breaking off some things that may have happened during the pregnancy. And so there can be trauma in the birth process. Different things can happen. Maybe the baby's too large and the mother may be having an extra long process of trying to deliver the baby. Just different things that can happen. And so we need to go back to those times and those places to see if there are any demons that have come through to torment this child. whether they felt suffocation, or whether they felt the pain, they felt trauma, and different things as they were being delivered. And just like I said, the use of instruments. Definitely we need to pray if you were delivered with forceps, and to bless your moment of birth. And you may have had a premature birth. Maybe you were taken from your mother and that you didn't have this bonding. And have we studied on bonding yet? Okay. Well, anyway, there's a teaching that I do on bonding and how very important it is that when the moment that you're born, that you're given to your mother for you to bond with your mother. That's very, very important. But some babies are taken from their mother. They may be in distress, something they may have been born with, not being able to breathe, or their heart not beating correctly. And so they're taken away and put in an incubator, and they haven't had that time to bond with their mother. And so that's some things that we need to look at also. Maybe you've had a trauma because of illnesses or separation. I know that I've been told by someone here that they were separated from their family and they were put in a hospital. Well, maybe your parent had to go to the hospital. I know another instance of a woman that's here that she said her mother had had a stroke and had to go away when she was a small child and be hospitalized and go through therapy. Well, she was traumatized by being left. She was young. She didn't know how long her mother would be gone, if her mother would return, if her mother was okay. And as children, we're not sure of things like we are when we get older because we understand things more. So there's different ways that trauma can come into you. Maybe you were given up for adoption, and we know we've studied that anyone that's given up for adoption always has a spirit of rejection and normally self-rejection. Maybe you feel abandoned by someone who's been ill and taken away from you. Yet you've been taken away for someone else to take care of you. Maybe your father was away at war, or maybe because of his job he's working a lot of hours, and you feel a trauma of separation from your mother and your father. Maybe you have a working mother that's always gone from home, and you have a caretaker that's always taking care of you. We see that many times that children are left with a grandmother, a grandfather, an aunt, an uncle, someone else, and the child becomes traumatized because they need to have their mother and father close to them. And maybe you become traumatized because you move to a new area. We can see this many times with people that are in the services, that no more than they get up friendships and they get accustomed to a school or surrounding, that all of a sudden they're being moved to a new area. And so they begin to feel trauma. They don't feel a stability, and it's like they have a nomad spirit that now they can't settle in somewhere and they can't be comfortable somewhere because there's a demon, a nomad spirit that has attached itself to them where they can't settle in. And so we see divorce of parents, that children are being traumatized time and time again now because of their parents divorcing, and the child always takes on a divorce and takes the blame on himself. And that's a trauma where they're not to blame, but they do blame themselves. Maybe you have a death of a parent that has died, and disease may take a parent away. They may have to go in for long-term care. Sometimes we can see that children will use sickness to get attention. Have you ever known a child that just wants to stay home with mama for the day and doesn't want to go to school, and all of a sudden, I have a fever, I feel sick. Or maybe they pretend to throw up because they just want to spend the day at home and they want mama to pet on them and pay them attention. I have a baby sister like that. Sure, I hope you're not listening. But anyway, she missed the maximum of school every year. However many days she could stay out, she missed because she wanted to play sick so she could get attention. And so anyway, but she had some trauma issues going on in her life, and she wanted extra special care. That's what ESP is extra special protection, isn't it? So that's what she liked. And so we see emotional problems coming up with people, traumas of emotional problems. I felt a little traumatized in this year. I don't know about the rest of you, but 2020 has been kind of emotional for me and some traumas. There's been several deaths in my family, and I lost my grand dog, and it's just some different things happening. And so we have to make sure that we keep ourselves clean from these things, and we don't go into a deep mourning or a deep sorrow. And that we begin to invite spirits in from these traumas. And so we may have a trauma from a sibling birth. Have you ever known like you were the youngest child and then all of a sudden another child is born and you're not it all of a sudden? You're not the favored one. And you may be having a trauma because now instead of everybody thinking you're the cutest and you're the bestest, somebody's replaced you. I know I'm number 10 of 11 kids, and so I wasn't the baby. Have you ever been the baby? And all of a sudden, the baby has been replaced? Well, that's a trauma when you were the favored one and you were the baby, and then somebody else is the baby, right? And you begin to feel abandoned. You begin to feel rejected. This is real life, isn't it? And this is things where trauma can come in. It's for sure. Okay. So we see trauma can cause acne or other disfigurements, a handicap. That's a trauma. You can have a generational or familiar spirit that has come in with trauma. Have you ever seen where someone is constantly having accidents, or they're constantly having some things that happen in their family? Does anybody recognize this? In your family, where repetitiously things begin to happen? If you have things that begin to repetitiously happen, you need to check it out, because you may have a familiar spirit that is causing things. I had a man that lived next door to me. I'll use this as a trauma. He told me every 11 years he lost his job. That 3 times in a row he had lost his job every 11 years. Now that is a cycle of loss. And you better be checking out what trauma demon has come to attack you and steal your finances from you and cause this trauma. Because he said no more than the 11th year came, he would lose his job. Okay, so what about accidents? Traumas, near drowning or choking, including being a witness. Vehicular accidents, sporting accidents, all other injury or mishap, near accidents, and shock. This can bring on traumas. See, one of you here had told me that you had almost drowned 3 times. I forget, or maybe that was somebody else. You better be looking for this and the demon that's causing this. If you've almost accidentally drowned 3 times, then there's something going on. There's someone's trying to take your life. And so what about conflicts and traumas? Family members. We know that we can have traumas. I have someone here that got hit in the head with a brick one time and caused a big dent in their head. Well, they had a trauma from this injury. Not only how it dented their head, but how they felt emotionally about this. And conflicts with your peers. You can have bullying. You can have either your school or your teachers that can cause traumas. I know someone that told me that their teacher failed them in school because they were on welfare. That the teacher deliberately failed them and told them that they were going to fail them because they were on welfare. And so that is a trauma, to be held back and not to get to go forward in your class. And what about attending military or boarding school? Sometimes that's a trauma to a child, where your parent all of a sudden decides, hey, I'm going to send you off to boarding school. And you're like, well, shouldn't I stay at home with you guys? I mean, all of a sudden you've been sent off as a child to go somewhere strange, to go to the school. And you can have traumas with your neighbors and friends, can't you? We see all kinds of things happening with neighbors and business relationships. You think about this, loss of income, because maybe you started a business with someone and the business failed. and now all of a sudden it's caused poverty to come upon your family because you've lost your money and your business. And bosses can cause you traumas, can't they? They can belittle you. They can do different things to you. We're seeing in life traumas can come in all kinds of ways. What about pastors and other church leaders? Maybe they've caused you some traumas. What about doctors? What if a doctor pronounces a terminal illness over you, only for you to find out that you didn't have what they said? And that can cause some trauma. So government or legal systems, we can see that people are in trauma right now over COVID because everyone's afraid to go out. We're afraid to be touched by anyone. We see that people are coming into being traumatized because of this. What about wars? Terrorist attacks of war, being in prison, that can be a trauma. And what about incest and molestation, rape? Different things, losing your virginity outside of the protection of godly marriage, that can be a trauma to a young girl or a young man. Any sexual activity that breaks the marriage covenant. What about somebody robbing you or bullying you? Satanic ritual abuse, false religion, and cults. We see many people that have fallen into the prey of cults. Who was it? Jim Jones, that led all these hundreds or thousands of people and convinced them to take poison to murder themselves. That would definitely be a trauma. To be in a cult that all of a sudden this was happening. Abortion is a trauma. The death of a person close to you. And we talked about financial loss or poverty. A person speaking fear of God or the devil. You can become traumatized studying too much on the demonic. Being the object of lies or gossip and vows we've made, that can traumatize you. Victim of verbal, emotional, or physical abuse. Evil words spoken by you by an ancestor over you or to you. Coarse jesting, victimization, or family scapegoat. Has anybody ever been the family scapegoat where you're to blame for everything? No matter, I have a hand back there. No matter what goes on, it's your fault. Okay. What about a victim of racial prejudice or cultural prejudice? We see this many times. Or what about if you're fat? I know when I was growing up, it was all skinny people. There were no fat people, except me, I thought. That was traumatizing. What about a performance-oriented home where love is conditional? I will love you if you're perfect. I will love you if you pick up your dirty socks and hang up your clothes. If you meet my standards, I will love you. Conditional love. That can be a trauma also. What about if you're just witnessing violence in your home? If you live with a violent person, so maybe they're verbally violent, maybe they're physically violent, maybe, here's a trauma. What about if they don't speak to you? If they get angry with you and they go months without speaking to you. They sit at the table with you to eat dinner with you, and they don't speak a word. And they take and write a little note to you when they want you to know something. I know somebody who did this. Now, I'm serious. People are laughing at me at this table, but I know somebody who's had to go through this. Then they were married over 50-something years. And when that person got angry, he would not speak to her and would just write her little notes for months. And can you imagine living in that kind of stress for months? And then they would finally get over it. But that is trauma. That is emotional trauma. And psychological trauma also. I mean, psychologically that could really harm you, couldn't it? And so what about if you're in the military or police service? Can you imagine the trauma that our policemen and doctors, the trauma they go through every day of seeing someone come in and you have to tell them that they're critically ill. I can't imagine being faced telling people they have cancer or they have some other debilitating disease that's going to be life-altering, the stress that they go through. What about keeping family secrets? Family secrets, that can be a trauma too. Because haven't you ever known a family secret where you just wanted to tell all? I mean, really, where you didn't want it to be a secret anymore. That can be trauma also, trying to keep the family secrets. And if you don't feel safe on an ongoing basis, what if every day you faced thinking that an irate father or mother was going to come in and going to beat on you or sexually molest you? Or what if they constantly pulled out a knife and threatened to knife you or burn you? I personally know somebody that she had a husband that liked to take and tie her hands up behind her back and burn cigarette holes in her. Yep. And then would throw her in a closet and lock her up for days at a time with no food, no water, and with those cigarette burns on them. This ongoing violence. We just don't know what people have gone through. And as ministers in doing inner healing, you've got to be prepared to minister to these different things and heal these traumas of these people. I'm never shocked by anything that anybody ever tells me anymore, because after 30-something years in the ministry, you think you've heard it all until the next one comes in. And seventhly, we want to talk about the broken heart and the traumas. We can have a trauma when we have unfulfilled expectations. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, doesn't it? That's what the scripture says. And that is a trauma. When you keep hoping for something and it keeps being held back from you, it can make a trauma come up in your life. Broken dreams, embarrassment. When you're the object of cruel jokes or remarks. What about somebody else gets a promotion at work and you thought you deserved it? And somebody else got the recognition for the work that you've done. What about if you've been betrayed or slandered? We see this many times in life where people betray us and they slander us. And somebody that you love dearly mistreated you. And we see separation now, and anger more than we've ever seen upon this earth, I think. What infidelity, divorce, rejection by a boyfriend or girlfriend or fiance can cause trauma. If you're childless, if you've always wanted a child and you don't have a child, that can cause trauma in your life. And so we see with this trauma comes the voice of Satan, where he keeps replaying events and you hear these condemning words all the time. And so you have traumatic memories and you have condemning memories and you have bitter memories. This all goes with trauma. And programming. Maybe you've programmed yourself to be anxious every day. This happens over time. Maybe you're overworked, overstressed. And then you begin to build up trauma in your life, where you just can't shut down these emotions and these feelings. You can become traumatized even in the basic things of life every day. Stress. How we deal with stress can be trauma, can it? And your own family can traumatize you. We can traumatize ourselves, can't we? Have you ever met someone that always is looking for the worst to happen? That they walk in fear and they're looking for the worst to happen, and it's and they do this repeatedly because it's a demonic spirit that's over them, a fear, but it's a traumatizing spirit that wants to traumatize you into thinking the worst, and you can't ever live your life in peace and rest because you feel like the worst is about to happen. And so you play these scenes over and over in your mind. I've done that. I'll confess that as sin, where I've played these worst scene scenarios. What if this happens? What if that happens? And what if? Am I the only one who's ever done that? If you've done that, raise your hand. All hands are raised. Y'all make me feel so much better. Okay, now. But God has perfect love, and perfect love casts out all fear. And fear is the opposite of faith. But that just goes to show you how Satan wants to traumatize us. He wants us to have it in our mind and to play these messages over and over in our mind of trauma. See, that's Satan that wants to keep you traumatized. Where God says He came to give you peace, He came to give you rest, but we can have all kinds of family trauma. And I talk to many of you during the week and pray with you, and there's trauma going on in your lives. Everybody has drama trauma, don't we? Where somebody wakes up in a bad mood one day, and then they get the whole cart of apples turned over, where all of a sudden it's demonic spirits that start these things up and going. And that's why we say it's important to put on the whole armor of God every day. That's Ephesians 6:10, in case you guys don't know, and plead the blood of Jesus, and just do those things to protect yourself. Just don't even get out of the bed without doing that, because Satan, he loves strife, because where there's strife, there's every evil kind of work. And so if he can get you up and get you in a trauma and get all these things happening, he's going to. And so we go on down and we see listed service providers, and we see social people. Maybe our neighbor can cause some trauma in our lives. I've had a few neighbors that caused me some trauma. He drove his tractor trailer up the driveway, and my driveway's like 1 foot apart from his, and he would traumatize me with his tractor trailer running all day long. And just little things, that come to try to get to you in different things. How about a barking dog that barks all night long outside of your window, and you can't sleep, and you begin to feel frazzled? That's traumatizing, isn't it? I mean, don't think of just the worst things as trauma, because let me tell you, I could feel anger rising up within me when that dog barked all night long and was keeping me awake. So that's trauma. And when anything that causes demonic influence to come into your life, the word says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. Well, I was definitely getting angry when the sun was going down, because it was in the middle of the night and I was losing my sleep. And so I had to walk in forgiveness, forgiving them, because I'm like, how can you get any sleep when this dog is barking all night long? And so I had to start turning on a fan and running it in my bedroom so I could drown out the barking. But in the meantime, trauma can come in all different kinds of ways. What about legal things? I know personally my family's going through some legal issues, and we're having to really pray to get over some traumatic things that are happening. And so we see that. And we talked about, have you ever gone on a vacation and you felt like you had a National Lampoon vacation? Even your vacation can cause you to have trauma. Now, my family knows we have been on some National Lampoon vacations. We truly have. We have locked the keys out of the car. We left the luggage on top of the car, and it went flying down the expressway. Just different things that have happened that you say, oh my, we shouldn't have done that. and so little traumas can come in. And so what you planned is the most wonderful, relaxing time, all of a sudden ends up being trauma drama. And so anyway, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. And so that's a few things that can cause some trauma too. And so we're going to go on and move on from this list that I hope you have checked off by now, some things that have caused you trauma. And so if you need healing from trauma, we'd like to invite you to contact us at House of Bread Ministries for us to minister to you and to take care of some of this trauma that you've had in your life. And so that is the conclusion of this teaching on this part. And thank you for joining us tonight, and wait for the next chapter.